I think that embodiment in the bedroom starts with embodiment elsewhere. I think for so many of us, we are living in our heads so much of the day or living for other people. So I think oftentimes there are things that can be embodying, like dancing or yoga or a walk, but that we do them as calorie burners or as like boxes to check. So we've gotten our fitness. So can we bring a little bit more mindfulness to the movement that we are doing? So I think that's it too, is can you just invite that awareness in movement? And then of course, like things like, I think anything we do can be done mindfully, like mindful eating, a mindful shower, like whatever moments of the day we can just attune to our senses and be more aware of like what sensation feels like on our bodies, in our bodies. And the more we can live like that, then the transition to sensation in the realm of the erotic, it's a gentler, smoother transition versus like I've been checked out all day long and now I want to be with my partner, but like I don't even know where I am. I haven't even been in this body all day. So that's those, I think there are like micro practices that can be done without a lot of time and energy that just like help us be more in our bodies.
Hope you enjoy a preview of this full episode published exclusively as a bonus for our incredible online neuro-nerd community. This group is the backbone that keeps this podcast thriving, and you can find out more at therapistuncensored.com/join.
Hi, Alexandra. Thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Oh, it's so good to be here with you.
I am very excited to talk about so many topics with you, but your book, Taking Sexy Back, the title is intriguing. Where did sexy go?
Who took it?
Who took it? And how are we getting it back?
Yeah. This book came out in 2020. It was my second book, and I've written another book since then. And what had happened was my first book was called Loving Bravely, and it was a pretty comprehensive introduction to what I call relational self-awareness, which is understanding ourselves in the context of our romantic partnerships. It was basically an introduction to relational self-awareness. And even as I wrote Loving Bravely, I thought, oh boy, I have a lot to say about sex. And it's not all going to fit into this book. And luckily, as you know, as a fellow author, like you're not stuck with one. You don't have to, put everything into one book. There can be more. And so I was really clear that I wanted to spend some time at the intersection of specifically gender and sexuality. And so Taking Sexy Back is a book, for those who've been socialized as girls and women in our world, who've been internalizing all kinds of messages about who we can be, who we best not be, who it's dangerous to be, what the consequences are of, showing up any given way with our sexuality, and to give us a chance to understand more about who we are as sexual beings. So the title is kind of clever. We took I thought about how like women get sort of told, either you're sexy or you're not sexy. And it feels like it's this thing, this like descriptor that's given to you or not given to you. And that sexy really ought to be a noun, and it ought to be our own relationship with our sexuality. So throughout the book, your sexy is your sexual journey. And it's this part of you that warrants gentle, tender, compassionate exploration of what are the messages that you've taken in that don't belong to you. What do you need? Where have you been? Where are you? Where do you want to go vis-a-vis your sexuality? So that's Taking Sexy Back. It was, I have the privilege of working at Northwestern, where I usually have a team of graduate students working with me. So I had this badass team of women and a couple of men too. And we just looked together at the literature on how we're educated about sex, in the US. And we looked at trauma and recovery. And we brought together a lot of the incredible research and clinical wisdom that is out there. And we moved lots of rage through our bodies and lots of sadness and lots of silliness. It was such a wonderful journey in creating the book. I think there was a lot in there for me to look at around myself as well, and so it was an important part of my journey as a person, as a woman, as a couple therapist, as a professor,
I love the systemic view that you're taking. So often we talk as couples therapists. I know that we bring sexuality into the couple about what's going on between the two of them, and the messages that you have, and the research that you guys have done on how have we been socialized? How have women been socialized? Something you say in the book's like, we're to be, we're supposed to be sexy, but not sexual, right? The idea of how women's sexuality gets portrayed in the media and how it's been portrayed in sex education. And it's so easy for us to forget that that's embedded in our scripts of ourselves.
Yes. I talk in the book about the difference between an outside in experience of your sexuality and an inside out experience. And there's a term in the field of psychology called self-objectification. As we talk about how the world objectifies girls' bodies and women's bodies. And there's also a way that we then, of course, if we are being objectified, then we learn how to objectify ourselves and to relate to our bodies in these ways that are objective. Rather than being inside of our own bodies, having a subjective experience, we are so often during a sexual experience spectatoring, sort of like watching from the outside or trying to perceive ourselves through our partner's eyes rather than being inside of our own experiences. And so that's a lot of the reclamation, is being able to connect inside of ourselves, being embodied, right? Being inside of our bodies first and foremost. And that was the woman who wrote the foreword to Taking Sexy Back was Dr. Lori Brotto. And she has fantastic research at the University of British Columbia, where she was like, okay, what the heck is going on with half of women reporting really low sexual desire? What is going on with that finding? And as she dug into that finding, where she went with it was so many of us aren't inside of our own bodies. We've got chatter inside of our heads about body image. We've got chatter in our heads about, I shouldn't want this. I shouldn't be hungry, sexually. I need to make sure my partner is okay. And she did mindfulness training. She just helped women be inside of their bodies. And was like, what happens if we teach women how to be more present, how to notice when they're drifting away, and how to come back? And she found that when women learned mindfulness skills, they had increases in not just sexual desire, but lubrication and orgasm and relationship satisfaction. Like, her scores were really quite powerful indicators that we deserve to come home, to come home to ourselves.
That research is powerful in the sense that so often I find the idea of desire even being pathologized. Like, for women having lower desires, what is wrong with you? And it's so personalized. Like, go in, is it your particular trauma? Is it something that happened to you that you have no desire? And looking at it systemically, like, why is it as a message that we have not only sexually to have that outside in, like our lives are sort of centered around being conditioned, those of us raised as women, to like go outside in for other people's needs is so hard. Like, I'm super curious about how the students that you work with that have been helping you in this process, how do they respond when they start to think about the cultural differences from way back when and now?
As you were asking that question, I was thinking about this memory. I remember exactly where we were all meeting, and one of my students, she actually was a college student. She was so cool. She talked about, she's a heterosexual woman, and she was having sexual experiences with men. And she'd gotten to the point where she was like, listen, you have perhaps been with some other women, but you have not been with me yet. So therefore, I need to kind of introduce you to like what my body likes. She really like empowered herself to be like, especially for somebody who's hetero, I think especially for heterosexual folks, where that script is so dyed in the wool about, quote unquote foreplay that is there to get bodies ready for the real thing, which is penetrative sex, even though, for those with vulvas, penetrative sex is like the least likely route to orgasm, right? Versus all of the things that are considered foreplay, hands and mouths and touch, like those are the things that are going to produce an orgasm for a person with a vulva. And she knew, she's like, if I'm going to have heterosexual sex, it's going to be safe for me to assume that this partner is going to, want to like just get me to the point where they're ready to penetrate me. And that's not going to work. So she really like learned how to empower herself. I thought, how beautiful that you are like all of 21 and know how to do this, when I feel like so much of my work with couples, in their 50s and 60s is like talking about this stuff. And then there's just like layers of grief, the layers of grief for the other way to think about that half of women have low desire is it's like, why would you desire sex that doesn't feel good, that isn't designed to support and serve how your body works? And that linear, penis focused, erection focused, heterosexual script, it doesn't work for a lot of women.
I bet there are listeners out there feeling surprised and relieved by that, right? You've been so into this dialogue that there's so many people out there, wait, sex isn't the penetration. And that many women, that isn't the ultimate goal of pleasure for them. And there's so much of the script that we've had that's what sex is. It's like we haven't had sex unless we've had penetration. And so, so the reformulation of that, those of us that are gay don't think that
That's
way.
Right. That means everyone's a virgin. Right.
There is that concept of that.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what I teach. I teach an undergraduate class at Northwestern called Marriage 101. We'll be teaching it.
I saw that. And I was like, why didn't I have a course like that? Oh my God.
It's ridiculous. Like every year I'm like, I just love that the university has not shut this down because I'm in there talking about porn and talking, we cover all of it. There's really nothing we don't talk about. And when we talk about sex, like that is the first thing I say is like, when I am talking to you about sex, I'm talking about everything that is the licky, touchy stuff. And then they're all like, oh my God, why is she so weird? Because if sex equals penetration, that means everyone in this room who's LGBTQIA has not had sex, and it's like ridiculous. But that's how deep this is, right? It is in the language that we use. The language conveys the assumptions that convey the otherizing and the less than and the you're doing it wrong and all of that. It just is from the language straight on to all of the rest of it.
Wow. If you think about the mindfulness point that you made earlier, if I'm feeling lower desire and I think sex is when it starts to happen in penetration, I can imagine how distracting, how mind wandering it would be if everything before that brings pleasure is really just preparation. And so we are kind of set up not to be in our body with that kind of teaching that we've grown up with.
Yeah, because there's a part of you then that's like, wait, why do we have to go further? Like, this is where the good stuff is happening. And now we're going to zoom past that to the rest of it. I mean, I'd be curious to hear for you when you're working with your couples. I think that's the conversations I'm wanting and needing to have with my couples. They're difficult. Sometimes, I don't know where a couple is supposed to have learned how to talk about sex. But when I meet a couple that can talk about it really easily and readily, that's to me much more the exception than the rule. I think for lots of couples, it's a difficult conversation. It's a vulnerable conversation. And the research shows that the couples who can talk about sex are the ones that have better sex, of course. Of course. But what do you find with your couples?
Yeah, it's exactly that it can be a really hard conversation, and that oftentimes even the idea of like unequal desires, which is very common in most of the couples that I work with, it being around the experience of rejection or problems within the marriage, or if you didn't have problems, you would have equal desires, these kind of misconceptions that often people come in with. I mean, that's why I love the title of your book. Taking Sexy Back isn't about all of a sudden now I'm ready to feel the desire. It's getting in touch with what feels desirous. That's the experience that I had with your book is like, oh, let's go internal. Let's find the awareness of self. And there's not one script that brings sexual excitement. And sexual excitement is not all about the other person's pleasure, right?
Well, yeah. And that's for women, no matter their sexual orientation, that is we are, to your point earlier about how we are taught to serve, to focus on others, to be good and nice. When it comes to sex, there's a need to be not selfish, like to the exclusion of your partner, but selfish, like focused on self, right? That we have to be responsible for giving our partners the information that they need to create with us experiences that are going to feel good. And that is, there's a beautiful way that it subverts all of the patriarchal scripts, right? Because if you are advocating for yourself, like that's a beautiful way to heal from all the times when you were rewarded for being nice rather than rewarded for being like a self-advocate. But it's confronting. That's really hard to do. It's really hard to do. I mean, I've been with my husband for 26 plus years, and it's still, there's still so much vulnerability in how to talk about sex. And whatever you thought you had figured out, you got to refigure it out as you just in every season of the relationship. So
That's
it's
such a
ongoing.
great reminder. We're sold so much that the sexuality is just supposed to stay, and when your desire starts to wane, that's either a problem or it's just the way it is, instead of that it's an active, organic something to explore. How do people find this book? And you mentioned the other book. Why don't you name both books? And then how do people find you? And tell us about your podcast real quick.
Yeah. My 3 books are called Loving Bravely, Taking Sexy Back, and Love Every Day is the newest one. Love Every Day is like a 365. Like there's just a little dose of relational self-awareness for every day of the year. It's a really, really sweet book. My website is dralexandrasolomon.com, and my podcast is Reimagining Love, which is a weekly show on all the platforms. And I look forward to meeting you in person when we're at Psychotherapy Networker
Me
together.
too. I can't wait. It's going to be a great experience. So, and everything you just mentioned, by the way, listeners, that will be in our show notes. So feel free to jump in there and you'll have some direct links to all 3 of her books as well as her podcast.
Thanks for listening to this preview of bonus content. If you would like to continue with the episode or to support free worldwide access to important material like this, you can join our online community for as little as $5 a month at therapistsuncensored.com/join. Thanks.